Hello everyone. It has been a couple of weeks. We were away last week, so it is back in action now this week. I'm going to give you 1 second to catch up with me there so that you're all able to jump in. And we have got a few exciting things to share with you today. We've got a few ongoing projects where the next part's coming out, and a few opportunities where you can jump in as well. So, hi, nice to see all your faces. I hope you're all doing well out there. Hey Liz, how are you doing? I'm wearing the Holly Blue cardigan today. It is Clue 3 release today. So if you are working on this knit along, you've now got the complete pattern and you get to finish it all off. This is always the fun part. I'll talk a small little bit about things that you can change to finish it off and ways of modifying as we're going through. Probably shouldn't have worn it today. It's still pretty warm up here in the studio, so I do have the sleeves pulled up. I'm trying not to overheat because it is warm, except outside when you hit the wind, the cardigan's absolutely perfect. If you are working on the knit along, or if you're thinking of joining, or you have any questions in relation to Holly Blue, pop them up and I will try and answer them as we work through this little live session here. If you miss anything and you're coming in after the fact, pop up questions afterwards. We can answer them in the discussion group afterwards. So no questions will go left unanswered. Just put them up and get them out there to us. So anyone who has been working on the Holly Blue knit along, you'll know that we've had Clue 1 and Clue 2 has come out already. First clue was down to the end of the yoke. Second one, we worked on the body, and now we're coming on to Clue 3, which are the sleeves and all of the edging. Liz, you love the cardigan and the motif on the sleeve was a surprise. Yes, here we go. I'll hold this up actually for anyone who's watching. There's a knittle lace sleeve motif on the top of each sleeve, just a teeny tiny one, just as an echo of the top up here. You can add a bit more in if you want, and actually in terms of modification, popping into KnitHub is one of the most fantastic, best ways of seeing what other people are doing. Because I've seen ones where we've got a couple of people have done on the back, one in the middle. There's a few where there's 2 or 3 run down the back. I've got down here, you can see there's one body motif added here. I think it was you, Liz. You added one in here over here. We've got Rourke Knitter from Griffith in the Riviera, north-southwest. I hope anyone who is actually up in Canada or in that area under the smoke at the moment, that you're doing okay and that you're not suffering too much in terms of breathing. I do hope they get it all under control soon, because it looks pretty nasty, I have to say, even from over here. We actually will be flying through Newark tomorrow, so hopefully the flights are going in and out, so it'll be indirectly affect us. I'm not living there, so it's not quite the same thing as being in those areas permanently. Anyway, back to my cardigan. The sleeves are worked from the top down, where you have these ones are held. You pick up stitches from the underarm and then you join to work down. You can see the sleeves I've got are full length, because most of the time when I'm doing summer ones, I do them 3/4 length. But what I was finding is when I wanted something in the evening, or if I had a long sleeve top underneath and I pulled it out, I had very few that were full length. So I just went full length with this. But I would absolutely encourage you to go ahead and make the sleeves the length that you need. So if you like full length sleeves, knit them as written. If you know you'll get more use out of 3/4 length sleeves, then shorten them a little bit. You may take a couple of the decreases down, because you won't need to go down as narrow on the wrists. If you find that you want more room up here, I would encourage you to pick up more stitches from the underarm and decrease a little more slowly. So this, usually most people's sleeves up here are quite big coming down, or your arm is quite big all the way down to the elbow. So you can slow down the decreases and take some of them out there. And then if you still want a smaller wrist, put them in a little tighter as you go along, or possibly leave a few out and then just bring them in before the edge so that the cuff comes in a little, or not at all. So there's lots of different ways that you can pop them in. The motif is optional. You don't have to put the sleeve motif in. You may decide to actually leave it off. I finished all of the decreases before here, so that just from a simplification point of view of writing it out. So it actually means that if you wanted a shorter sleeve, you could just leave that section out with the motif and add the edging up here. There's been a few people talking about the ribbing on the body and the fact that they hadn't tried a twisted stitch ribbing before and they really loved it. It is one of my favorite. I tend to not use a 1x1 ribbing by itself. If I do a 1x1 ribbing, I will almost always work those knit stitches through the back loops. It gives you a lot more tightness and cohesion and kind of a crisper stitch definition. You can see it here. The knit stitches here are twisted around, so it gives it a much, much nicer effect. You can bring that anytime you've got 1x1 ribbing and you're a little unhappy with the way those knit stitches are looking. Go ahead and replace it with a twisted stitch. It will pull it in a little bit more, but for ribbing, that's usually what you want anyway. If you want the sleeve a little bit longer, I would suggest as well maybe spacing out your increases or your decreases a little bit more so that they're not all bunched up here and then you've got a big long stretch which is the same. And keep trying it on. That is like the number one thing with sleeves, is try them on. Even if you found that it blocked a little with, it grew a little with blocking, steam block it. Just get a steam iron or another steam over, smooth the stitches out and get a pretty accurate measurement that way as to where the length is going to be. And number one rule, write down whatever you do so that when you do it on the other side, you are matching it up. That is often a rookie error when you start going and making changes to a sweater design, which you've got to have two things that are matching, that you forget what you're doing. If you do forget, you can come back and you can kind of unvent as you're going along and check where they're decreasing, but it makes life much, much easier if you just write it down as you're going through. In terms of the sleeve, it's worked in the round and you can use any method you like for that. My favorite is always magic loop, particularly with the cardigan, because you've already got the needle, you've got the right length needle, you don't have to change anything. So it means that you're flying along. You have no problem with setting it up, because when you're setting up magic loop and you've got all the stitches here, you can't twist it, you can't get the front and back mixed up. It is the easiest way of working magic loop. So if you've had problems setting magic loop up before, but the actual mechanics of magic loop are okay for you, I would encourage you to go ahead and try it out with this before you move on to other needles. Now you can also get like really short needles that work. I can't use those because of my knitting style. I don't have enough grip for my fingers. If they work for you, they're a very good option here. Double pointed needles, absolutely perfect. Again, I have the same issue. So this is why there are so many ways of doing it, is that everyone's style is different. Your style of knitting will dictate which type of working a small circumference in the round is going to work for you. One thing I will warn you to watch out for is that most people's gauge, when they move into a small circumference, tightens up. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's the fact that it's just so small and you're moving very frequently. Generally speaking, people will have a much tighter gauge. So you can do two things. One, you can consciously watch your tension, make sure it's not pulling too tight. Or two, you can move to a larger needle size. If you know that that will always happen to you, then just go ahead and move into a larger needle size. So that's the sleeves. Next thing we're going to be doing is our neck ribbing here. So it's again 1x1 twisted rib. I quite like the size that the neck for me was at, so I didn't put on a very wide one. You can see it's a pretty narrow neck ribbing, but that's another one where if your neck felt too open, there's two things you can do to help with that. The first one is, normally you pick up 1 stitch for every cast on stitch. You can go maybe pick up 3 for every cast on stitches or 4 for every 5. So you skip some as you're going around. That by itself is going to tighten it up a little. You can make sure you drop down a needle size anyway to give you a nice firm edging when you go along. And the third thing that I would definitely encourage everyone does is when you bind off, make sure you have a nice snug tension. So keep it nice and tight on the bind off, because you can see here when it's sitting, this wants to stretch out. It's taking the weight of the sweater. So you want to make sure that that bind off is nice and firm and it's going to give you a nice bit of structure up there. With more width, you're going to have a little bit more structure, but I liked just the size of this was pretty much exactly what I wanted for a summer cardigan. You may have a different style, like different things. If you want it more open and it's the size you want, then you could just pick up around here and do an I-cord bind off, which gives you I-cord is nice and firm and it holds the shape well, but it doesn't add any extra width. So that's another lovely option for the edging there as well, is an I-cord bind off would be a great one if the neck size was pretty much the size you wanted and you just wanted a firm edge. So that's the second thing you're doing. Third thing is these front bands. You're picking up stitches along. Anyone with beady eyes may notice, and I didn't realize this until afterwards, the standard way of doing women's patterns is you'll have the buttons down the left side and the buttonholes on this side, which is how I wrote the pattern. Then when I was actually doing it, I don't know what I was doing, but I did it the other way around. So you will notice that my buttons are on this side and my buttonholes are on the left. Everything else is going to be the same. I've written it the other way around. It's kind of, I remember having a discussion with this a few years ago. It's the opposite way around depending on whether you're a woman or a man. And the reason historically for that apparently is because women were generally dressed so that the buttons were put on the other side. So in theory, having the buttonholes on the left is, you know, maybe a bit more feminist because you're dressing yourself. You don't have a dresser having it on the other side. Regardless, put them on whichever side you want. It is written the other way around in case you're wondering with the buttonholes along here. I hadn't noticed until somebody spotted it. Just wasn't even thinking as I was going through. But that's why the product is worn versus in the pattern is going to look a little different backwards around. The only time I've ever seen it really come up as a question is things like baby garments, where it's a unisex one, and I've had people request it on one side versus the others for a boy versus a girl, and to me it shouldn't really matter because you're dressing them regardless of the sex. So I'd say don't get too hung up about it, but just in case you're curious, it makes no functional difference. They're all going to work the same way. So that's my 2 cents worth in relation to putting on buttonholes and which size they happen to be on. In terms of the buttons, I've got, these are very lightweight mother of pearl buttons, 20 millimeters wide. I go for things like coconut mother of pearl because of the fact that the newer yarn is a very lightweight yarn. If you put a heavy button, like if you try to go for something like a glass or a metal, it's going to be very heavy. Wood would work fine too. Anything, when you pick it up, it's nice and light is quite important because otherwise you can end up with the front stretched out. But that's kind of pretty much most of the things that are left to do with it. Oh, the only other mod that you might find is if you found that you didn't have quite enough room in the cardigan or it was just slightly too snug, the button band is only just a little over an inch wide. You could easily make this a small bit wider if you just wanted to tweak it to give you a tiny bit more room. So they're just small little changes you can make as you're going along. The other thing I wanted to talk to you about today is the fact that our summer seasons launched last week. And a lot of you have been having a very hard time deciding on the yarn colours. I'm going to pull them out over here. I've been working on some, I can't show you the full thing because I've got little bits and pieces in here, but I thought I would share with you just the different colours again. So the yarn is 90% Pima cotton, which is a very soft cotton, and 10% cashmere, and it knits up really, really nicely as you're working on it, and it's a very comfortable thing to wear in the summer. So I've actually already finished the main version in the main sample in this, and I have worn it, and it was extremely comfortable, and I loved it to pieces. So this one is the seasonal color. It's a little kind of a lilac-y, pale bluey color, so that's our seasonal. Here is, I think it's just the most beautiful pink. This is our bright color, and you will get, it's 5 balls of this is what comes with the club, plus a little knitting extra. These are all kind of a little and wound because I've been doing different samples with them. And this one here, kind of a little tealy color, aquiline, is our subtle color. So actually all the colors go really nicely together. Even if we decided to do something stripe-wise, it would be really pretty. But there is less than a week left to join the club if you want to pop in. Now, if you aren't into getting more yarn, if you're like, I've got too much yarn in my hands, but you still would like to have the summer season, we do have a digital option where you get the patterns, you get the workshop, you get to join in on all the chat in the exclusive community, and of course there's the Zoom live. But this is going to be a fun one. I did enjoy this particular pattern, designing it, and I'm working on the second one, there's one bigger pattern where there's 2 different size options, and then there's another smaller kind of fun little extra that I'm still working on. I've got a few ideas and I think I know where it's going, and that's going to be coming on holidays with me. I'm off on holidays tomorrow, and my intention is to bring it with me and to kind of play with it while I'm away. And it's small enough that I can quickly do a few variations on it. But yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what comes out of that. I think it's going to be very, very fun. Elsa Louise was asking me how the event went last week. It was great. So I was away last week because we were at the Enterprise Awards, which was kind of incredible. It was a little bit overwhelming. It's a very big venue. It's in the Mansion House up in Dublin, and we were the finalists for Cork City because I've been working quite a bit with Leo of the Cork City Leo. They actually have helped enormously through what I've been doing with the business, growing it between expansion grants, mentoring, and just really backing me up from a business point of view. Because coming from as a designer and an engineer, I know what I want to do, but then the business side of it is another whole kettle of fish. So it was a really, really good evening. So thank you, Elsa Louise. And you were asking how many meters per 100-gram ball. I'm going to say I think it's 140 or 145 meters per 50-gram ball. Might be off by a couple, but that's more or less the ballpark of where you're going. So it's a sports weight yarn is kind of where it's slotting in as, really. And Liz, enjoy your holidays. Thank you. I am off for the longest holiday I have had in 3.5 weeks. I'm going with my family to Costa Rica to visit my sister-in-law, who I haven't seen, I think, in about 4 years. And we start in the mountains, and then we're going to go down to Diosa to by the rainforest for the second half of the holiday. And I'm bringing my camera, I'm bringing my microphone, I'm bringing my tripod, and the intention is there's a few people that should be really interesting to meet, and if I get a chance, I might do a few little videos with them. One person up in the mountains, she actually does floral intarsia knitting and sells the finished pieces, and I've seen some of her work and some of the prints made from them, but I thought you guys might like to actually visit her as well, so I can do, if she's into it, I might do a little interview and chat with her. If she's not so much into the interview, I will definitely give you a little feature on all of her work. And hopefully in the second week I can try and do something where we have a little check-in, perhaps a live of some description later, probably impromptu because I don't know when I'm getting down there, but you might like to see the little area. It looks really nice, so I am very much looking forward to it. The other thing that came out this week was part 2 of the Galway blanket. I'm just going to pull this out here. So anyone who's partaking in it, you know that every 2 weeks we've got another 3 squares coming out. And this week, these are 3 squares. So we start off with Blackberry Stitch square from Laura here, which is always a winner. It's just lovely and very textured. Second one is again from Laura, and this is the trellis pattern. So you can probably see here, it's got 1x1 twisted cables back and forth with little moss stitches in the middle. And the bottom one here is, it's a gorgeous textured loops cable where it's just very intricate and just lovely texture. You can probably see the texture very well there, but it's got a lovely feel to it. I've got Ethel, don't work too hard. I will not work too hard, and if these don't fit in easily, I won't do it, but it does seem a shame to be in places that it would be nice to share, to not take a couple of videos. But my main thing is to kind of dream and plan and hopefully get a little bit of inspiration and refill my cup is the intention for those 2.5 weeks. Because when I do a lot of designing, I do worry about it becoming too functional and just like, I need to do this now. Whereas to be able to sit down and dream about what you're going to do next is just, it's quite a luxury. So I'm going to make sure I take advantage of that is my intention for the next several weeks. But that's, that's pretty much what I need to tell you about. And I will see you in 3 weeks' time. I should be back in time for the live at that point. You remember, if there's any comments as you go through, pop them up here. Either me or one of the team will go answer them when I'm away. And yeah, enjoy the next few weeks in your summer. And Laura's here, and please feel free to send orders into her. I'm sure she wants to be kept busy when I'm away, because it's not like she has anything else to do, right? Except for me to annoy her. Anyway, bye everyone.